Stop asking us what to do, how to fix things, all right? I'm so tired of this. I'm so tired of this, the diversity conversation, inclusivity conversation, all the conversations. All of us want to be working and not having to come and do fucking panels and speeches in the middle of our day. This is a great thing. It's good that we're talking about it. We have to keep talking about it. But this is the shit you got us doing. You wonder why there's no Indigenous stuff out there? This is the shit you got us doing.
Within the entirety of Native and Indigenous representation, it's always been really hard to capture authenticity, both in the casting and in the actual storytelling. However, I think I'm gonna try and tackle the things that make it so that the authenticity can be more seen. So this video is going to be more for, I guess, Native creators, Natives in general, and screenwriters, producers, and directors out there. Of course, casual viewers I'm sure will enjoy this as well, but I would really like this to be a video that helps spark some conversation. So let's go. So I stated this on Instagram. I wanted to make a clear distinction that kind of helps us navigate this whole situation. It's the distinction between Native run projects and Native themed projects. When I say Native themed projects, those are projects that are usually mainstream. They usually have a non-Native director, producer, writer behind the camera, and it's usually done by a larger studio. And these projects have like a bunch of Native themes. It's like a Native story, or like they'll have Native characters in them. But there aren't a lot or hardly any Native input behind the camera. Examples would be like Mel Gibson's Apocalypto.
You know, that movie.
A woman walks ahead, and I mean, obviously Avatar and Dances with Wolves. Like these films, they have a huge industry backing, but there aren't a lot of Natives in control behind the camera. Native run projects, it's in the title. These are projects that are written and directed and star, or at least like have a large, Native cast. I mean, obviously a good example of this is Reservation Dogs, Rutherford Falls, Blood Quantum, like a lot of Native indie films that, are about Native stories, but that feature Natives in front of the camera and behind the camera. And like I said, not all Native themed projects are bad, like Prey is a great example. With all of that in mind, the nature of the project is gonna inform and affect who will be in the film and how they will be portrayed in that film, and by who.
Well, I mean, look, the film industry is an industry, right? So it's, and what's behind the entertainment industry is it's a money-making venture as well as being entertainment. But, to those of us in the trenches who really care, of course, like specificity is authenticity. So the more specific we can get, the more authentic we're being.
So with those distinctions clear, hopefully, there are industry factors that contribute to the story and the casting of Native characters. And the one big one is marketability. You have to think about marketability. And there are a few things that lead to a film being a bit more marketable. The first is the director, producer, writer credit, or even executive producer. These are films where, you see a name pop up and that really intrigues you. Right. I remember seeing the trailers for the first Transformers movie, the Michael Bay one, and one of the executive producers was Steven Spielberg. And I was like, oh, somehow Spielberg's involved in this, right? And that gets, people's attention. The other one is the studio, and now these days the streaming service, right? A Netflix original, an Apple TV original, Hulu original, all of these ones, they're exclusive to these streaming platforms, and then also the studio behind it. I'm thinking A24, right? Like the A24, the studio and distributor have kind of become like a brand in itself now. And so when some people see something with the A24 logo, they get excited. And the next one is the cast. Like the cast, in my opinion, is probably one of the top reasons of marketability, right? You have A-listers and B-listers. You have to have some type of name that's associated and attached to a project that will help get people interested. The other one is the intellectual property, or IP, also like a franchise. You know, I mean, like Marvel is an IP, the Alien versus Predator franchise, right? Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, these are already existing intellectual properties that are, you know, being leached off of in a good way and a bad way to create, you know, movies and television and video games. And the last one, in my opinion, that really helps a lot too is genre, like horror, thriller, romance. Like if you really put that out there, like this is a horror film, or this is a romance, this is a sci-fi fantasy project, that will definitely get people's attention. I believe that, in my opinion, that starts at the base. So let's look at examples of each of these that I listed in regards to Native representation. And now, these projects I'm gonna list are both Native themed and Native run projects. So the director, producer, writer, executive producer name credit, right? I'm gonna list them off here. We have Killers of the Flower Moon, Scorsese. I'll talk more about that film here in a bit. Yellowstone, Taylor Sheridan. 1883, Taylor Sheridan. Apocalypto, Mel Gibson. Antlers, Scott Cooper and Guillermo del Toro. Dark Winds, Robert Redford and George R.R. Martin. You know, these names attached to these projects are one of the things that draw people into watching them. Next one, the studio/streaming service is associated with Reservation Dogs, exclusively on Hulu. Rutherford Falls, exclusively on Peacock. Resident Alien, exclusively on Sci-Fi. Dark Winds, exclusively on AMC. And 1883, exclusively on Paramount. But a lot of it too helps with, again, the one before it, the names. Reservation Dogs had Taika Waititi as an executive producer and a writer. Rutherford Falls had Michael Scherer and Ed Helms. The next one is the cast. So we have Killers of the Flower Moon, Dances with Wolves, Woman Walks Ahead, Wind River. The next one is the intellectual property, the IP and or franchise. Prey, Hawkeye, and later, you know, Echo in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The What If series, also Marvel. Dark Winds, which is based off of an existing book franchise. And Killers of the Flower Moon, which is also based off of a best-selling novel. So these films had that layer on top. And then the last one, I think, you know, it's not the strongest, but it certainly helps, is genre. So I'm thinking Blood Quantum. One of the things that was marketable about that film is that it's a zombie apocalypse film with, you know, with native characters and themes at the center, right? That made it interesting. A Slashback, that's a sci-fi horror, right? Nobody's really recognizable in that film per se, unless you're in Canada. But the genre itself kind of tends for it to be more marketable. Antlers, same thing. It had all the names behind it, but the genre itself, it's a cryptid horror film. Like, of course, like people are interested in that. And then, honestly, any Western, right? Any Western is going to lend itself to be marketable, especially if it has native characters. 1883 and I think even 1923, and just any Western you could think of. The English is another great example of that. So again, okay, these are all just examples. They're not definitive, like, you know, these are all, and they interlink with each other. Some of these are a mixture, right, of the cast and the director and the franchise or whatever, right? And I just wanted to illustrate, though, to show you like what goes into consideration of these projects to, one, get greenlit, two, like who produces it and how, and then who stars in it. All of these affect those major things at the end. So I wanted to look at these two as case studies and to kind of illustrate my point here. So Dark Winds had three main things going for it. It had the studio/distributor/streaming service. It was on AMC, which is in the streaming game, it's pretty up there. And you had the franchise. It was an existing book series by Tony Hillerman and big names in the executive producer space. The casting was something that, of course, had considerable effort. But I wanted to explain and kind of follow up with my Dark Winds review. I didn't talk about my issues with the Navajo language, but that's because of this. However, I don't quite address the use of Navajo language in this review because I went on a long rant, and then I realized that this requires its own dedicated video, because not only is it me discussing the nuances of the Navajo language with these actors and the casting and marketability and stuff like that, but it's also a reflection of the industry and where we're at now. But just to know that, like, you know, there were issues and critiques about the Navajo language, but that's going to be its own video down the road, hopefully the next one, where I just dive into that and have some more research backed stuff to give you guys some context. And also why there weren't Navajo actors in the prominent Navajo roles. So with those 3 industry factors I just listed above, though, that was enough for this show to be greenlit and, you know, made. So you have 2 things going on. One, you have Navajo protagonists, but you need to have significant star power. These are names that need to be recognizable to the general audience. Of course, you got fans of the books who will watch, fans of Robert Redford and George R. R. Martin. Of course, they're going to watch, right? But you also, I mean, the goal is to get as many freaking eyeballs onto the screen as possible, right? So, to the casting directors and the showrunners of the show, to their credit, they got the best I think they possibly could with, you know, the talent that they were given.
You know, I'm very familiar with the show and the cast, and yes, Zahn and Jessica Matt and Kiowa Gordon. I mean, they're all marketable talent. I think, you know, what I would say about that is that they're very talented actors, and going back to like how far we've come, at least they are Native, which is like, you know, I hate to say like at least at the beginning of the sentence, but you know, but even that is, in my lifetime, we've come a long way. But also what I do really admire about that show, Jennifer Schwallenberg works in the casting department. She was my partner for 6 years, and we together created a database of Native talent, and she does the location casting. And I think last season, again, this isn't my show to blow up, but I think that she told me that something like all but 2 of the Navajo roles were Navajo, and the other 2 were of course Native. But you know, as far as the roles that she casts, she works in New Mexico and really focuses on the Indigenous talent there. And so I know that she got as specific as she could, and Renee Haynes does the you know, the lead casting, and I know that she works hard to at least, you know, get as many. She, you know, whenever we're doing the lead casting, we have to walk the line of like marketability along with authenticity. So I know that Renee does her best, and I know that Jennifer is like a darn good casting director and extremely dedicated to authenticity. So I think the show is doing, that show in particular, I think they're doing the best that they can, and they've got some good people on board to help with that.
And is that enough for like some Navajos? No. A lot of Navajos I know were pretty picky and pissed off that they weren't Navajo. None of them speak Navajo, but as far as I can tell from what I've read, they only have about a month to learn their lines, their Navajo lines. So good luck teaching a non-native speaker one of the top 5 hardest languages in the world and how to pronounce things correctly. I mean, there were some Navajo talent in that show whose Navajo felt weird. The point is that the production needed recognizable faces to sell the show. And honestly, like, those 3 actors fit the bill pretty well. Like, if you look up Dark Winds on Google, the face you'll see the most is on McLernand's face. Plus, it helps that he's got a good looking face. He's a good looking guy. Unfortunately though, there just isn't a Navajo actor of his caliber, not, I don't want to say in quality of acting, but like in stardom, who I think would have matched that. Ryan Begay, I think, would have been a close second. But like, he's just not that recognizable, unfortunately. Now, hopefully he'll get more and more work from here. But this is, again, you got to think like this is what producers think about and casting agents think about. All of these compromises were made to just get the show made in the first place, which, you know, I've heard some Navajo people say to like, well, get Navajos or not at all. But like, I'm sorry, but like, if you want something of the quality of Dark Winds, Like, at least we had Navajo talent. You know, you had Navajo actors and actresses in that show. So again, this is just a step in the right direction. We're slowly getting there, which I'll get to at the end here. Now, with Killers of the Flower Moon, this film has 3 of those industry factors going for it, and they're big. The director, producer, writer. I mean, Martin Scorsese. The cast is freaking huge. And of course, an existing intellectual property, the book. The book did really well when it first came out, and it still does. And the movie, I think, is inherently promoting the book even more. So you had those 3 great things behind it. And obviously, you can add studio and streaming service because it's later going to be on Apple TV. And I think because of all these industry factors with it, it's going to compete as a historical drama. It's going to compete with Oppenheimer. And again, Oppenheimer is another example of how just the name of a single person can drive it to just being a blockbuster event. You know, Nolan, right? I can imagine any other Oppenheimer biopic by any other director. It would have been hype, yeah, but the fact that Nolan is behind it, it's like people are freaking out seeing Albert Einstein like he's some sort of Marvel character. Now, these 3 industry factors with Killers of the Flower Moon have affected, I think, the story itself and also how the story is perceived by people. The marketing for this film knows people will go for the cast alone. This was interesting. I really wanted to see reaction videos. So I looked up reaction videos to Killers of the Flower Moon, and it was fascinating. Most of the people, I would say a good 90 to 95% of the people I've watched react to this reacted purely to the cast. They freaked out. Plus it looks a little bit unique in the sense like it looks quality, but they freaked out with the cast. And mostly they freaked out at Brendan Fraser, right? Because, you know, he's had a bit of a renaissance lately. And I would say a good 10 to 15% of the people were like cinephiles and they wanted to go just to see a Martin Scorsese film. There weren't a lot of people who knew the real story behind the Osage murders, right? I wouldn't expect them to, but it just goes into why I think films like this are important down the road. Now, of course, I'm just illustrating this just to prove that like the cast definitely has a huge pull on who is going to watch it. And, like the native characters in the story are just a bit of a mystery. They know it's a crime, but they don't really know exactly. You know, the trailer does intrigue you. It does a good job kind of letting you know what it's going to be about. And I'm kind of interjecting here because I was just about to release this, and the second trailer dropped today. And again, when it comes to the marketing, one thing that I didn't mention too is that when it comes to the marketing, again, like compromises again, like with the casting and everything, but like especially with Killers of the Flower Moon here, like the non-native cast is being predominantly shown because they're big names, right? But then with this second trailer, which is again, I posted about it on Instagram, but like I guess tonally it was just way different than the first trailer. The first trailer was dark and eerie and heart-wrenching, right? This one is hype, right? It's playing a hallucination for Melona's A Tribe Called Red, but like the marketing team is really leaning into like Scorsese's like Goodfellas, Casino, Wolf of Wall Street type of vibe, and it just is weird. But I already watched a few reaction videos to that already this morning, and it is interesting. The people are more intrigued by it now than they were before. So again, like this goes to show that like some of the compromises that have to be made in order to get something marketed well and people interested. I'm just glad that they at least use an Indigenous group to use in the marketing for it. I am glad about that. But it's just the tone was weird and kind of off-putting. But regardless, it's getting people's butts in seats at buying the tickets and everything, and so they can see this thing. So, in some reviews that I've read and watched from the Cannes Film Festival, it's been mentioned that the film focuses a little bit too much on Leonardo DiCaprio's character, Ernest, overshadowing Lily Gladstone's character, Molly, who are a couple. Some people have felt that the performances were overshadowed. And there's a difference, I think, when a performance is powerful versus the story and what it does. Scorsese, unfortunately, has a history of this where the protagonist is usually overshadowed by either a supporting character or the antagonist. I think of Gangs of New York, where our protagonist is our hero, but unfortunately the antagonist, played by freaking Daniel Day-Lewis, overshadows him in performance and in screen presence, right? But I'm gonna save that judgment for when I actually see the film. I'm hoping that the second half of the film is gonna shift us toward Molly's perspective of the murders. But this is the issue here. Because they casted such a star-studded cast, they unfortunately might overshadow Lily Gladstone and all the other Native actors in this story. What gives the Native perspective weight is the fact that they're the victims. And you gotta be careful with that. And I trust Scorsese is going to kind of be balanced here in a bit and not like overshadow the Osage perspective, but not make them look like to be completely helpless in this whole situation. They needed that outside investigation from the FBI. Anyways, I kind of wanted to showcase that. I'm speculating because all of that was affected by the casting of those people in this film and how certain characters are portrayed, right? And if anything, this film will kind of push Lily Gladstone up further to be seen. I mean, I don't know. I think once you're in a Scorsese film, people look at you a little bit more. And so I really hope Lily Gladstone gets the work that she wants and she needs. So there's a glaring issue though about these two examples that I just gave. And it's that they are Native themed projects and not Native run projects. The reason I focus so much on mainstream projects, I know a lot of people, I've heard some people say, how come you don't talk about this? How come you don't talk about this? Well, those are indie features or they're smaller stuff. Some of them are purely in Canada and I have a hard time getting to watch those. And I don't want to pirate it because it would be disrespectful to the creators. The reason I focus so much on mainstream projects is because they have three big things going on for them. They have the most quality, right? The quality is going to attract people. People love quality. They like seeing the art, the craft being done and executed correctly. And it has the most money behind it, right? We live in a capitalist society and follow the money, right? And not always, you have franchises that are getting exhaustive, or you have, $1 million projects that have been hit or misses. But in all of those, there's gonna be a few that are just great, right? And the last one, in my opinion, is the most important, but it's a greater visibility to the general public. A film like Killers of the Flower Moon obviously needs to be seen by the general public. Like I said, the people who were reacting to the trailer, they didn't know about the story all too much, or the Osage murders were a bit of a mystery to them. And again, I'm not blaming them. I'm not saying they're like, you should know, although our education system should tell us more. But the film is really gonna lend to people knowing more about this. And if anything, it'll push them to read the book, which is a lot more it's more of a journalistic take, right? And it needs to be seen and it needs to be heard, right? The Osage story needs to be heard. Another film has come out and is making its rounds is Bones of Crows by Marie Clements. It's an equally important film about the residential school system in Canada and all the atrocities that came with that. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a lot of the same industry factors that Killers of the Flower Moon has. And again, I don't expect it to, but I'm just giving a clear example here of what the power of all of the mixture of these industry insights has compared to an independent film. It did really well at TIFF and a whole bunch of other film festivals. It's having a theatrical run in Canada, but it's not gonna have the same weight and broadcast as Killers of the Flower Moon, which is gonna be in theaters in October. And depending on how well it is, hopefully it will stay in theaters for a month or two. I don't know if it'll be released internationally, but at least it'll be released domestically. And it's going to go on to one of the larger streaming platforms, which is Apple TV. But unfortunately, Bones of Crow doesn't have all of that. But here is the difference. Bones of Crow is a native-run project. Writer-directors are native. Cast is predominantly native. It has all of the right stuff. And it's quality looking. Like, I haven't seen it yet. I've seen trailers and clips from it, but it looks very well made. But unfortunately, that's where we're at. We're a native-run project where it's that big, just unfortunately won't have the reach as. And again, I'm plugging for if you're in powerful places or you want to try to promote it, but please, like, that film needs to be seen. And you look at Killers of the Flower Moon, which has all of those industry factors and insights behind it, but it is a native-run project. Now, I'm not complaining that it needs to be a native-run project, although it would be nice, but the point is like, we're just not getting there yet. Okay, so there will always be films, television, video games, and other pieces of media that are going to have native characters and native themes in them. Due to the standards of the industries and its standards for success, native and indigenous representation as a whole will stay relegated to minor roles, misrepresentation, or not having a really wide distribution. And so the solutions for adjusting the industry standards, and again, I don't want to adjust to the industry standard. I do believe the industry standards need to kind of change the way they do things. But this is, for me, this is a halfway point where we can work within the industry. I'm kind of talking to native creators now, if you can't tell. Work with the industry and in a way so hopefully the industry can work with native creators. But some of those examples of solutions include insert native characters into existing intellectual properties. And that's already happening with Marvel. And the Predator franchise already did that, right? They have their existing franchise, but they just inserted native characters where the characters being native doesn't affect the overall thing. It's allowed to play with it, right? And so therefore, the native representation gets to be really tight and honorable. The other is to adapt existing IP that already have native characters and themes. I mean, Marvel already has native characters in them. Certain novels like Killers of the Flower Moon, which is about native characters, native people in real life. You have all of these, right, that have native people in them already that are existing in different spaces. And so you could adapt those. And then another is to find established industry professionals who can make a native project, happen. I'm thinking Reservation Dogs and Rutherford Falls. Reservation Dogs was really pushed by an already established industry professional. That was TAIKA Waititi. Rutherford Falls had Ed Helms and Michael Schur kind of behind the project and curating it and making it happen. Prey, Dan Trachtenberg. This is one of those things too that I think will be very beneficial. REZ BALL, that's coming out now, is being produced by LeBron James's production company. The next one, make genre films. I've said this before and I will die on this hill. One of the main keys in my opinion is to indigenize genre, right? When I say genre, I'm talking horror, sci-fi, fantasy, thriller, these films that are just they're very marketable, right? Especially horror. Natives in horror, I think, have a great future if more natives are behind the camera. The next one, have programs and labs for up-and-coming indigenous filmmakers. And guess what? That's already happening. I know Native Media Alliance has a lab, and then obviously the Indigenous Directors Lab, Writer-Director Lab. So there's things out there, but the main thing that I want is to kind of promote a culture of performance and behind the camera on reservations and with Native communities. Do more, have more theater, get involved in social media, get used to being in front of the camera, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few elements to that. For one thing, I would say with REZ BALL, with Reservation Dogs, we have a large percentage of the cast that are like street casting, if you will, people who have no experience but are authentic to the community. And A large part of that is that I think I approach casting in a different way than maybe some other people or typical casting directors might. I don't just go out just straight out looking for a performance in a scene. I'm looking for people that are authentic to their own selves, people who are comfortable in their own skin and who are characters. And rather than trying to make someone play a character, I'm looking for people that are their own character, you know what I mean? And then can just kind of comfortably transition whoever, whatever they are, into this, kind of on-screen persona. A lot of times it is close to who they actually are as far as the personality or some of the characteristics are to them. I also nurture, these fledgling actors, if you will, people who don't have experience. I spend time with them on Zoom, over the phone. I make myself available to them. Let's talk about it. Let's work through it, because it's when you are street casting or casting non-actors, it's an entirely new world to them, something that they know nothing about. So, to at least be there, make myself available to them, to kind of walk them through the process, answer questions. These are things that I think just help people tremendously rather than going in blind. Sometimes it's just about answering a few questions or running the scene a few times, and let's talk about it. Let's talk about your character. Let's talk about how it feels. And we certainly did that through the early seasons of Reservation Dogs. And again, we did that on REZ BALL.
And this is the other thing that I'm finding very interesting about what Angelique Midthunder is doing right now to kind of in regards to promoting that space for Native talent, but she's really taking a personalized experience with the up and coming Native talent and guiding them, kind of letting them know what to expect, right? I honestly don't see that happening much in the industry with regular casting agents, who there's kind of this wall, or I don't want to say cold-heartedness, but kind of is they're just okay, cool, you're going here, you're going here, going here, right? But Angelique really guides these kids and these new up and coming actors to kind of get them used to being in front of the camera, getting them used to, learning about the industry. And I really appreciate there's something more communal about that experience. It's very Indigenous.
The other thing I'll say is I have to give the filmmakers credit for Reservation Dogs. Sterling Harjo, before we started that casting process, we knew that we were doing open casting calls on the reservations in Oklahoma. Sterling called me and said, this is the only way we're going to do this. We're not finding these Hollywood Indians. You're coming to the res, and we're gonna find real people to populate this show. And he told me where to go. He's from Oklahoma. He's like, you're gonna go to Seminole. You're gonna go to Okmulgee. And I was like, okay, we're gonna do it. And then the night before we started casting, Sterling said, okay, what time tomorrow? And I was like, oh, no. The producers don't show up at the open casting calls. I go to the open casting calls. I narrow it down for you, and then I show you the best ones. And he's like, no, I'll be there. And that man was at every casting call, beginning to end, with his guitar, with bags of chips. And, he was walking the lobby, shaking hands. He'd come in and be like, I saw this guy in the lobby. He seemed cool. Let's keep an eye out for him. People would come in the room. He'd kind of nudge me like, I like this one, and Sterling, being from the community, shaking hands, saying hi to people, every person, where you're from, I know your dad, that really opens up to make people comfortable, to give them a sense of security. Whereas it's not like an us and them situation. It's like, hey, we're in this together, and we want to create an environment for you to be successful in. As far as REZ BALL goes, Sydney Freeland, same thing. She's Navajo. We're working in her community. She knows everybody. I know almost everybody. And so together, she and I were really able to kind of recreate that similar experience where people coming in are feeling comfortable.
And the last one is solution I have is take a chance. This is me talking to the executives and producers. Take a chance on native talent.
Don't, please, not on my account, don't put a Polynesian in your thing just because you feel you need to. It has to make sense. What I want to see is a fully Polynesian, controlled Polynesian story that's written by and show run by. When we make our things, don't give us a white showrunner to tell us the rules and tell us how to do things. Let us figure it out and let us figure out the structure of the story in our own way from our own experience.
There's some native talent that is out there. There's native talent up and coming. So take a chance on those people. You can mentor them. That's happening. You know, I know for a fact that, you know, natives who are already in the industry have had mentors or had help from other BIPOC creators. And when I say take a chance, this is the one thing that Angelique talks about that I thought was interesting was like Sterling Harjo, when he was casting for Res Dogs, he knew the community. He kind of knew exactly what type of characters he was looking for. And so it was kind of like off the street. It sounds kind of weird, but literally just getting normal people who weren't used to acting and getting them in the show, right? And in my opinion, because of that, that's why like Lane Factor has been able to be in a freaking Steven Spielberg film. Paulina Alexis has like captured the hearts of millions, right?
Are all you guys kind of similar to you? Like you got like good funny one-liners you throw out there.
That's what I love about the show, cause like we're all basically playing themselves. Like they wanted Res Kids, they got Res Kids. So yeah.
That's exactly right.
So these solutions, they're being implemented. And so that I'm not saying that they aren't, but I guess I'm trying to put forth like a combination of all these, different combination of these can really help push native representation forward. It's gonna take more and more casting agents, producers, studios, and directors to notice the native talent that's out there and coming. And I say that because I know there are a lot more projects coming down the road. Many that are native run and many that are native themed. Even the ones that are native themed are having a lot of native input behind them. And so like REZ BALL, that's, in my opinion, REZ BALL is going to be another Reservation Dogs. Ironically, they both have Res in them. It's gonna be a native run project on a large streaming platform about native stories, right? A modern native story. We're getting there, you know, and I'm excited for it. I really want to see their takes and the nuances that they have with portraying these native kids, you know.
Look, I mean, it was definitely a joy to you know, be working on a project that plays for Shiprock. I mean, yes, that's definitely a part of my personal history. The way that Amber landed herself on REZ BALL is a long story. I mean, basically so first of all, I couldn't be more proud of this cast. All of the main REZ BALL team all came from the world of athletics. Not one established actor in the bunch. Not one. Yeah, I mean, these are not practiced actors. We did a huge search, you know, into Indian country, you know, through the basketball world, and we tested everybody for their acting skills, for their basketball skills. We vetted for authenticity, and we kind of took the pinnacle of those three characteristics, and that, you know, became the shallower pool that we combed through to find our talent. And we ended up having, you know, a huge callback session where we flew in actors from, well, or I guess I would say athletes, or, you know, we flew in people from all over, from Canada, from all over the country, New York, Arizona, California, you know, the best of the best performances, the best basketball players. And of course, everybody was legitimately, you know, tribal communities, tribal members, and it was really fun. So, you know, we did chemistry reads, we did basketball tryouts. So it was an incredible process. The team came together beautifully. I mean, everybody is such an individual character. They all have the sharpest skills. And then as far as Amber goes, I mean, the female team, we had a little bit more trouble pulling together, and then definitely the role that Amber plays has quite a lot more acting than basketball. So we tried to pull that role from the basketball world, and at the 11th hour we decided we had to go with actors. So so we auditioned it, and and that's where it landed. But the whole process has been really fun, and I think you'll love. It's not a spoiler to say Ernest Sosi has a prominent role, and I mean he's just crushing it. So it's almost done, and it's really coming together like amazingly.
Oh, that's great to hear. I'm actually really, the fact that Ernest is in it makes me excited. I absolutely freaked out when I saw him in Rutherford Falls. Like, he had like a quick cameo in that one, and I was like, oh, it's Ernie. I grew up watching him and James and Ernie. Like, I loved watching them growing up and everything.
Yeah, and Jennifer Schwallenberg, who I was just bragging about casting Dark Winds, she did the location casting, and we collaborated. She found some of the members of the team locally. I mean, we have, I would say, about half the team is Navajo. We weren't able to get the entire team Navajo, but we have at least half of it, and the all of the supporting roles, thanks to Jennifer, are almost entirely Navajo as well. I mean, and it's a huge cast when you consider the supporting characters. I think that you are going to be amazed, pleasantly surprised, and I think that the Navajo Nation, the producers have been working closely with, the president of the tribe, and I hope that the Navajo Nation is proud of this movie as well.
I think they will. I mean, REZ BALL is already its own thing, so I think people are just excited to just see that on the big screen. I know we've had other stuff. There was a documentary that Netflix did a couple years ago, and then it goes far back as I think it was Edge of America. That was one that was made I think in the 90s with Irene Bernard in it. So I think I think, in my opinion, I don't speak for all Navajos, but we're happy to see a way more authentic representation of REZ BALL. And I mean, sports stories inherently are just good stories anyways, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really proud of this one.
Indigenous representation right now seems to be having great momentum in TV and streaming, as well in the indie space. These are the two spaces right now where, Indigenous representation and storytelling is thriving, and there's less risk there associated with it. It allows these studios and producers and directors to get a glimpse of Native talent that's out there. I mean, look what happened to TAIKA Waititi. TAIKA Waititi is an interesting case where he started off with Indigenous storytelling and very Indigenous themes, but because of his genre bending and unique storytelling, he caught the attention of other people, right? And he was able to work on non-Indigenous projects. And so he's reached a level now in the industry where he can pretty much dictate the projects he wants to work on, or be more free to accept different jobs, right? But because of that, he has been able to help curate and help greenlight Indigenous themed projects, most famously Reservation Dogs, and another one from a Navajo director, Billy Luther and Chandine Tom, is Vibrate Face and Me. It's an indie feature that's making its rounds in the indie circuit right now, I believe. But TAIKA was an executive producer for that. So I really do think the key is to just, one, make good art, make something good. It's make sure you put story first and practice on perfecting your craft. And two, build a network in the film and television and gaming industry while working on your regular stuff. And my goal, me personally, my goal is to promote both as a commentator and as a creator to get to the point where native run projects, both in film, television in particular, will have the same prestige as something like Killers of the Flower Moon. Reservation Dogs is getting it very close. So thank you so much for staying with me there. It was a lot to take in, I'm sure, a lot to think about, marinate about. Please just comment if you have any insights or any ideas that can help drive the conversation forward. And of course, I want to thank Angelique Midthunder for joining me on this conversation. It was great to talk to her and just get some insights on what's going on, you know, in the industry in regards to Native and Indigenous representation overall. But guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.